بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. So the Imam Muhasibi rahmatullahi alayhi, after yesterday we spoke about yaqeen. And we said that a person, they can never reach the pinnacle of yaqeen in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala based on their knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is unencompassable. Our knowledge cannot encompass Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even in Jannah, our eyes cannot encompass Allah. We'll see Allah, but we won't be able to fully comprehend Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is above us. So now, the author, he says, وَلَا يَكُونُ الْخَوْفُ إِلَّا بَعْدَ الْيَقِينِ. That fear of Allah can only be found after conviction in Allah. وَهَلْ رَأَيْتَ خَائِفًا لِمَا لَمْ يَسْتَيْقِنْهُ. And have you ever seen somebody afraid of that which they are not certain in? You'll be afraid of something when you believe in it, when you're certain that it could happen. So fear of Allah can only happen when a person is sure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And yes, yaqeen in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it varies by degrees. Like we have our brothers that came in Jamaat over here, what they'll be speaking about, increasing iman and yaqeen. Iman doesn't increase, right? But the perception of iman, that increases. Taqwa increases, right? And what is that? Another way to term it is yaqeen. So iman, either you have it or don't, but yaqeen in Allah, that increases, so it makes your iman feel stronger. So yaqeen is never ending, but you need to have some level of that in order to have fear in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now what is this fear found in? Three things. وَالْخَوْفُ فِي ثَلَاثَةِ أَشْيَاءٍ. Khawf is found in three things. Khawful iman, a person having fear over their iman, or a person could say the fear that comes along with the iman. That is وَعَلَامَتُهُ بَذْلُ الْجُهْدِ فِي مُفَارَقَةِ الْمَعَاصِي وَالذُّنُوبِ وَهُوَ خَوْفُ الْمُرِيدِينَ. And the sign of this fear, the fear that results from iman or the fear for one's iman, is that a person expends all efforts in separating themselves from ma'asi, from blatant disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and from zunub, from sins. وَهُوَ خَوْفُ الْمُرِيدِينَ. And this is the fear of the murideen, the murids, the ones who seek Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's pleasure. Now, when it comes to sins are of different levels. There's different words used in the Quran and Sunnah. Allama Anwar Shah Kashmiri rahmatullahi alayhi breaks them down. He says the highest level of sin, the strongest word that's used for sin in the Quran is ma'asi, right? Ma'asi, asa, that word. And in contrast to it, from the obedience of Allah's side, is ita'ah. So ma'asi, blatant disobedience of Allah. And ita'ah is obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Below that, the next level of sin is zunub, right? No, that's the lowest level. Then there's one more, that's slipping my mind. Below that, there is sayyi'ah. Sayyi'ah means that you did something bad, right? In contrast to that is hasana. And below that, there's dhanb. Dhanb is like you did bad, there's a sin. There's nothing really in contrast to that, right? There's one other word that's used in the Quran and Sunnah that's slipping my mind, but it's above sayyi'ah, and it's below ma'asi. So wallahu alam, if I remember I'll share it inshallah tomorrow. So anyway, after that he says that the second fear a person have is khawfu salb wa khawfu salb. Salb means for something to be removed. A person fears that their iman will be removed, that their connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be taken away. وَعَلَامَتُهُ, what is the sign of this? Al-khashiyah wal-ishfaq wal-wara'. It's that a person has fear of Allah, and a person has reverence of Allah, Wal-wara', and a person is scrupulous, meaning a person takes extra precaution. It's not only that they avoid doubtful things, they avoid halal things as well at times. وَهُوَ خَوْفُ الْعُلَمَاءِ بِاللَّهِ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ. And this is the fear of the ulama, those who know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's why an alim should be the one that's most precautious. As I've said a few times after tafsir, that the attitude of an alim or of one who knows Allah as well should be fatwa tere liye, taqwa mere liye. The taqwa is for me, fatwa is for you, right? So you can't impose your rigidity or your taqwa on other people. Even you can't impose it on your spouse. This is wrong. But a person, they should have that for themselves. It's mentioned, and I'm not trying to get into any controversy here, but there's a concept of Yawmush Shak. Yawmush Shak means that when the moon is, it's not really going to apply in this day and age anymore. Because over here what will happen is news, it spreads very fast, right? Regardless of whatever method you're following for the month starting, news, it spreads very fast. But in the old days what would happen is when people would look for the moon prior to Ramadan, the thing that would happen is a lot of times people in the villages, they would see the moon. They wouldn't be able to get to the city to tell the people that the moon has been seen, especially on cloudy days. So what happened is they'd come, after 2-3 hours after sunrise, they would arrive in the city. They'll tell the qadi, they'll explain the moon was like this, I saw it in this place. If the qadi accepts it, he'll tell the people, okay, Ramadan has started. If you haven't eaten anything, then make up then continue your fast. Otherwise, make up one fast after Ramadan. This is known as Yawmush Shak. However, it's makruh to fast on Yawmush Shak. Why is it makruh to fast on Yawmush Shak? Because a person, their niyyah will not be set. A person, they'll basically have a double niyyah. I'm fasting because it might be Ramadan, but it might be a nafil. That's why it's makruh to fast on that day. However, Qadi Abu Yusuf rahmatullahi alayhi is mentioned about it one time. It was Yawmush Shak, and a person came to him and they asked him all of these questions. And I remember he says that Qazi Abu Yusuf, he was wearing black and he had a black turban on, and he was riding a black horse, and at that time he had a white beard. The only white thing on him was his beard. And somebody asked him a question about Yawmush Shak. He said, it's makruh to fast today, right? And then the person said, okay, come to my house to eat. So Qazi Abu Yusuf, he pulled him close and he whispered to him, he said, I'm fasting. I'm fasting. Why? Because there's a small possibility that's Ramadan. He told everybody else, don't fast, because you won't be able to keep the niyat straight. But for me, I have to keep it, right? Also, it also matters where you are. You could say there's in Isha 18 degrees. There's ihtiyat, right? The imam of the masjid is not going to take that stance, right? Maybe if he's not praying in the masjid that day, he'll pray at 18 degrees. Otherwise, there's gunjaish, right? There's gunjaish. You're not going to impose that on everyone else. But whenever there's an ikhtilafi issue, a person should have wara. They should be careful, especially one who knows Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. After that, wa khawful fawt, and a person fearing that something is lost. Not taken away, but lost. وعلامته بذل الجهد في طلب مرضات الله بوجود الهيبة والإجلال لله عز وجل وهو خوف الصديقين. The sign of a person having fear that their connection with Allah will be lost is that they expend efforts in seeking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's pleasure with the presence of awe of Allah and feeling insignificance in front of Allah's majesty, in honoring Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning it's not enough that I'm Muslim. No, I will always do more to seek Allah's pleasure. وَهُوَ خَوْفُ الصِّدِّيقِينَ. This is the khawf of those who are the siddiqs, those who have confirmed the truthfulness of this message. وَمَقَامٌ رَابِعٌ فِي الْخَوْفِ. And there's a fourth level of fear. خَصَّ اللَّهُ بِهِ الْمَلَائِكَةَ وَالْأَنْبِيَاءَ عَلَيْهِمُ السَّلَامُ. Allah has made specific this level of khawf only for the angels and for the prophets. وَهُوَ خَوْفُ الْإِعْظَامِ. This is the fear that comes in exalting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is مَعَ أَنَّهُمْ آمِنُونَ فِي أَنفُسِهِمْ بِأَمَانِ اللَّهِ لَهُمْ while they are completely secure in regards to themselves because Allah has promised them security, yet they're still afraid of Allah and they still glorify Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and they fear that they're not fulfilling Allah's hukuk without any possibility of them being punished by Allah. All of us, we don't have this. We don't have any guarantee from Allah that nothing will happen to us on the Day of Judgment. The Anbiya and the angels, they have this from Allah. Yet even then they fear that they're not fulfilling Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's hukuk. فَخَوْفُهُمْ تَعَبُّدُهُمْ. Their fear is their worship of Allah. لِلَّهِ إِجْلَالًا وَإِعْظَامًا. Out of their glorifying and their magnifying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's greatness. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to have true fear of Him as well. So you see this connection with Allah and the journey to fear and khawf of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's a never-ending ocean. And that's why I felt that this book was very beneficial to read, because we see that there's further dimensions. You never reach the end. There's always somewhere further to go. None of us will reach the level of the Anbiya alayhimu salatu wasalam or the Malaika, yet they still have fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? We went over that riwayah yesterday, in which it's attributed to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The riwayat is not so strong. That's why I'm not saying Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said it. But it's attributed that he said, if Isa alayhi salam's yaqeen increased even more. It's a prophet, right? So this is always increasing. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillah.